welcome to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We appreciate you joining for this episode where we'll be talking about Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2. But before we dig into that, a little bit of housekeeping. We do want to remind you that we are sponsored by ProgressiveChristianity.org, a fantastic, if not perfect, place for all of your progressive Christian resource needs. Encourage you to check that out. And always, we encourage you to check us out on our Facebook page, as well as all the great spots where you get your podcasts. Make sure that you're signed up to download them. And we always have to say, and this is very important, this isn't a slight spoiler zone. This is a full-on spoiler zone. We will wreck as many things for you as we possibly can. So make sure that you have been watching or you don't mind spoilers before you tune in. If you do mind spoilers, just bookmark us here, come back, watch it a little bit later. More importantly, welcome my co-host, Caleb. How are you doing today, sir?
I am doing fantastic, Mark. I love Star Trek, and I am ready to talk about Strange New Worlds.
Me too. Well, before we do, let's make sure we got a couple of decent beverages to do so with, as we always have a themed beverage. So curious what you decided to go with.
I decided to go with an Orion Hurricane.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, so this
plays a little bit of an important role here.
It is, yes, and it plays an important role in the crossover episode, one of my favorite episodes of the season. And so in that episode, Mariner from Lower Decks, who's crossing over to Strange New Worlds, is making these Orion Hurricanes, but she doesn't have the appropriate Orion alcohol, so she just kind of had to improvise. Since I also didn't have the appropriate Orion alcohol, I decided to improvise as well. So it's very green. And so here's what I made, Mark.
Okay.
I used, because we're still in summer, right? Still hot outside. I used popsicles, green popsicles, and I put vanilla vodka in it. And so this is my version of an Orion Hurricane. It's a very summery drink. Popsicles and vodka.
Love it. Well, it's interesting that you picked the old scientist crossover episode and that you picked a drink from Mariner, because I did the same thing, not the same drink though. In Lower Decks, where Mariner crosses over, one of her favorite drinks, and one that she went to great extents at one point to get a hold of, was Romulan whiskey. And so I have a glass also in my Star Trek old-fashioned glass of Romulan whiskey. Frankly, Romulan whiskey, at least in terms of what you can find online, is essentially a whiskey sour. And instead of simple syrup, you use blue carousel. So that's what I'm having. Cheers to you, sir.
Cheers.
Here is to another great, fun episode. And we'll catch the rest of you on the other side of this drop.
Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Hello, and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show, where today we're talking about Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2. So we're going to geek out for a little bit, and if you hang on, we're going to get into the theology and politics of Star Trek, which, if you're a Trekkie, you know there's all kinds of theology and politics in this. Okay, so if you're not familiar, by some chance, with Star Trek Strange New World, here's what it is. It is a spinoff from Star Trek Discovery that follows Captain Christopher Pike and the crew of the Starship Enterprise in the 23rd century as they explore strange new worlds and carry out missions throughout the galaxy during the decade before Star Trek, the original series. So last week, I made a very bold claim about this.
Yes.
I said that Star Trek Strange New Worlds is the best Trek ever. So, Mark, my first question is, can you tell me all the reasons why I'm right, as usual, about this claim? Just kidding. Was I too bold in this? Do you agree? How do you think Star Trek Strange New Worlds relates?
I think when you put it within the the era which it appeared, that yes, it and the Next Generation are the best Star Treks that have existed. Next Generation really gave Star Trek the energy and the forward movement that we have now. It wasn't until it, and they had a great cast. They were episodic frequently, much like this. Great writing, dealing with real hard topics that the world was struggling with. So I there's part of me really wants to completely agree that it is the best ever. But I think if I'm sitting down for a purely evaluative kind of, there's other ones that are very, very good.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the Next Generation and Strange New Worlds by far are, I think, for folks like us who enjoy science fiction, who really like good storytelling, and who appreciate people who grapple in real ways with theology and politics and who we're supposed to be towards each other. Yeah, I think these are easily the best. Easily.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm a hard convert. I am a huge Next Generation fan.
Oh, yeah.
And, I grew up kind of watching that. That's the, I
mhm.
watched the series over and over again. I love that. But
Same.
I really have so enjoyed this. Maybe it's because it's been a long time since we've had really good Trek.
Yeah.
I mean,
Discovery's pretty good. It's a little more.
Okay.
It's a little more action oriented. Is my only problem with it.
Yeah, it didn't resonate with me. I mean, I watched all of Discovery. It didn't resonate with me the same way because I think they missed fundamentally what Star Trek's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about like a hopeful vision of the future and what humanity can do when it is at its best. And I think a lot of the newer Trek didn't understand that element of Star Trek.
I think Star Trek. I think Star Trek Picard is the perfect example. The first two seasons of it seemed to stray away from what really matters in Star Trek. And their ratings fell because of it. In season 3, they came back around. Admit some of it was just giving fans what they wanted by bringing the gang back together. Right. But the storytelling improved and moved more towards what we really care about and what really makes Star Trek Star Trek. And so I think that's a great show to see the difference between what a lot of it has been, which has been season 1 and 2 of it, and then what it should be, which is season 3 and Next Generation and Strange New Worlds, at least for the first 2 seasons.
Yeah, and I think one thing that really has stood out for me about Strange New Worlds is one, that they can tackle heavy issues and make a commentary and, do what science fiction is designed to do, which is to be in a different time and place, but speak to realities that we're experiencing now, which is one of the great things about Star Trek. But 100%. They're not afraid to poke fun at the canon and to poke fun at Star Trek generally, and not take it too seriously, which is something that was a lot of fun this season. Oh yeah, I thought.
I think it's the perfect balance. They take themselves seriously, but they also poke fun at themselves. They're willing to take big swings, which is unusual in Hollywood in general right now. Trying to play it safe tends to be the thing. This writing staff seems so confident in what they're doing, the story they're telling, and that the crew that they have and how they can pull it off, that they're willing to take big swings that could be horrible.
Yeah,
it pays off so well over and over again. This is good television, man. This is good.
It's good television. It's compelling. It's entertaining. And let's talk about those big swings, right?
Yeah.
Because there were some big swings this season.
A couple of really big ones.
Right. Yeah. So there were 2 standout episodes, I think, right?
Absolutely.
The crossover episode and the musical, Subspace Rhapsody. How did you feel? They took a big swing. Did they hit a home run, or was it a swing and a miss? What do you think?
So when they announced both of them, my initial reaction was concern, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay.
I was like, how do you take a series that is completely animated and integrate it, and all about the jokes and poking fun at everything that it is, Like it's mostly poking fun at itself all the time.
It is, yes.
How do you take that and pull it into a show that pokes some fun of itself, but also is very serious, deals with very difficult issues, and does it in deep dialogue? And speaking of dialogue, like Lower Decks is all loud and quick and blah 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 blah, and
something
Strange
they make
World,
reference to.
And Strange New World is so like kind of like even keel and like moving dialogue and really engaging.
Have you noticed how softly everyone speaks?
I know. That's the funniest. That was a great line. That was a great line. And so I was really worried about, but not as much as I was about the musical, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
I thought the crossover, one of my favorite episodes of any Star Trek ever. Like,
amazing.
I can't imagine it being more balanced. It was unbelievable how they wove the two together. I mean, they had the benefit of both Boimler and Mariner voice actors happen to look a lot like their actual characters. They
right. Yep. That made a big difference.
That helped a lot. But even the actor who played Boimler, I can't even think of his name right now.
Jack Quaid.
Yeah.
Jack Quaid. Yeah.
The way he literally embodied, like
the
he
walking,
ran,
the funny
he did that weird speed walk, right? It was incredible. Mariner had that like mischievous smile on her face the entire time. Like it was kind of perfectly played.
It was great. Yeah.
And there was this weird balance between the self-deprecating, poking fun at of Lower Decks and the very serious, what are we doing? What's going on here and how do we handle it? Along with, which is going to be one of my things that I want us to talk about in the next segment, along with a very important theme running through the whole thing that they have to grapple with and try to come to. I loved it.
Yeah.
The musical, I was more concerned about it. And I am a guy who loves musicals.
Me too.
The first play I was ever in was a musical. Like I love musicals. I was very.
Are you a singer?
I like to try.
Oh.
How about you?
No, I'm a terrible singer. I'm someone who sings, and everyone's like, "Please stop! Don't do that anymore."
I play a little guitar. I've sung in church. I play a little ukulele. I've had sermons that I sung in and out of the sermon, so I do a little bit. So I wanted it to be good, but I was very concerned that there was any way it could be good. I'm going to be completely honest.
Yeah.
My first watch through, I wasn't as thrilled about it as I hoped I would be. Yeah. I thought the first run through, I wasn't as impressed with the songs as I thought. I was very impressed with how they navigated which characters might not be the best singers, but they gave them just the right things to do. I loved Mabinga said, I sang it. I don't sing.
I don't sing. I
don't sing. Because I think that might probably be the actual case with the actor. And I love that Spock, Ethan Peck's, they gave him kind of like spoken word singing, kind of, which whether the actor or not sings, that's perfect for Spock.
It was perfect Spock, and it was perfect to start out with Spock, him being the first one to sing,
And when he sings, he's also, I think every time he sings and is the primary singer, he is in the engine room, which is great. So it's sort of, because, I mean, the whole story is we're singing because we're exposing emotions. It's kind of cool that when he did do it, he was still in kind of a safe, non-emotional space doing it. Kind of like the cause there. The second time watching it through, I completely changed my mind. I realized how brilliantly it was written and how well they kind of poked fun at themselves for the fact that they were singing, and that there really was a theme running through each style of song that they were doing that became very important, which is another thing I'd like for us to talk about in the next segment. That was really there and consistent, and they really pulled it off. I know that that's one of the most controversial episodes, but I ended up being a fan of it for sure. How about you? Out of the two, what were your thoughts?
Okay, so I loved Lower Decks too. I thought it was a great crossover. I thought they did a great blending, and Jack Quaid in particular, kudos to him for embodying Boimler. But
unbelievable.
but too the actress who plays Mariner, great, just a
Still
wonderful
Mariner.
episode.
Nailed it.
I loved it. I love the way that they also integrated animation and live action. I thought they did
Right.
that in a brilliant way,
Oh,
starting and
mhm.
ending with
So
animation
good.
and getting to see the lower decks or the Strange New Worlds
Strange
characters,
New Worlds, animated. And then picking
After
fun at us.
drinking.
I didn't think my eyes would be so big. I didn't
Yeah, why are my eyes so big? What is this stuff?
It was great. It was so much fun.
It's so fun. It was such
Yeah.
a funny episode. So much
It was
fun.
definitely
I loved
it was definitely a fan service episode,
Yeah.
but only to 40% of the show. The rest of it was a very serious Star Trek Next Generation Strange New World show.
And it was still enjoyable, I think, for
Oh,
folks
yeah.
who
It was
don't
enjoyable
watch it.
the whole time.
Because I watched it with my dad, who doesn't
Mhm.
watch Lower Decks, and he enjoyed it. He thought it was
There you
fun.
go.
And so I liked it. I think that was a great episode. But my favorite was Subspace
Yeah.
Rhapsody. So, like you, I am a huge musical fan. And you know this, Mark, that in my church, every October, we do Broadway
Oh,
musicals for
absolutely.
church.
I love
love
that y'all do that.
musicals.
I
Yeah,
love that
I
y'all
mean,
do that.
I love it, and so I was there for it from the very. I was
Yeah.
waiting for this in anticipation, and from the first lines, I was there for the
Yeah.
show,
Yeah.
and so I thought it was brilliant, and
Yeah.
I thought my first lines were, "Oh, we need a Broadway Star Trek musical. This is what we need. This is what my life has been missing. It's like the best
No.
things in life. It
I
is
can't agree.
musicals and it's Star Trek.
can't agree. No, I don't
I'm
know
there
that.
for it. It'll just be me, maybe.
I
Mark's not
think
gonna join me.
I think within this episode it worked because it really was like the way they wrote it was fantastic about the fold in the space, in the not space time, but the fold that was happening in
The subspace network
subspace,
and all.
the
Yeah,
subspace fold, yeah, and that
Yeah.
they sit in vibrations
Yeah.
and they shot them back and trying to create a new reality wherever that made a lot of sense. I'm not sure you can pull it off on stage. I don't know.
For a whole musical.
I don't know. But I
You
will
know
say
the other. Yeah.
maybe go ahead because we might be getting ready to talk about the same thing. You go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say the writers of the music, that this wasn't just something that they just threw together either. Which one of the things
Right.
I think made it so good is that they practiced for like 6 months, and
Yeah.
they had the, because one of the things that struck me is like everybody can sing, and that's not the case all the time. And so they listened to people's voice, they got them vocal training, and they wrote songs around people's
what
voices.
they could do.
It-
It was
And
Really love
incredible writers, right? Like, so writers from Letters to Cleo, a band of which I really like, and also from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, right?
Yep.
Another wonderful musical on TV that I can't
Yeah.
believe was ever on TV. So incredible writers who know how to write things
Yeah.
too, that make commentary and weave into the plot of the show. I
Man.
was amazed by how
and
well
we would be remiss if I don't only love musicals. I am a massive, and I mean massive, a cappella fan, all forms. Barbershop, all the way up to pentatonics. Massive fan. The opening sequence where they did the theme song a cappella, I was blown away. I was just so like, holy moly, that was
amazing.
Brilliant.
Amazing. All right, man. I have a lot of other things that I want to geek out about.
Sure.
Because I could geek out for like an hour just on this episode. But I know we have promised folks that we'll also talk about theology and politics, and that's one of the richnesses of Star Trek is that they have a lot of that. So let's take a quick drop, grab some more to drink, and come back and talk about the theology and politics of Strange New Worlds.
Hello and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. You're joining us for our Theo Politico segment. So Caleb, I don't know if we're going to have time. I'm going to try to do this. I would like to have a question about the opening episode, the concluding episode, and then one from each of what is obviously our two favorite episodes. So I'm going to start with this. I'm going to start with the season opening, and we start the season with the crew of the Enterprise stealing their own ship in order to save one of their own, La'an. So my question to you is, and we've tackled similar questions, are there times when we must defy? It's actually three questions. I'm going to let you answer them all at the same time.
Of course, yes. And I've got to do it efficiently because you've got a lot
efficiently,
of them.
Please. Okay. Are there times when we must defy authority? And if so, how do you balance when it's the right thing to do and when it isn't? And does that hold true for things in the church as well?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, it's not a Star Trek without them in some way stealing the Enterprise. You know, that's every crew has to do it. They have to somehow steal. Mm-hmm. That's right. They got to steal it. And if they can blow it up while they've stolen it, all the better. All the better. Right. So, yeah, of course there are times. I mean, right, laws are laws, but they're not necessarily just, right? We've got all kinds of history of laws that are unjust. Slavery is an extreme case in point, right? And so the ethical thing to do is to break the law. And so the way that we determine that is whether or not laws are oppressing marginalized groups in particular, right? And so if they're exploiting people and oppressing people who don't have the power in society, then the ethical thing to do is to break those laws. And, people running the Underground Railroad is a case in point. But there are all kinds of laws like that are unjust laws. I mean, we've seen, I think, we see unjust laws in cases like gerrymandering or something today. I mean, there are all kinds of laws that are unjust. And so the same, yes, absolutely. The same is true in the church, right? That the church has all kinds of injustice, and in some ways is worse than the state and the ways that it oppresses people. And so, actively breaking the church's rules is one of the things that I get great joys out of in my life. It's one of the things that we got to do is we've got to do that because the church is supposed to be a place that follows the teachings of Jesus, especially around how we treat marginalized folks. Break the rules.
I completely agree. I mean, particularly when it comes to the theological dogma of the church that's rooted in old ways of seeing the world. And I think it's essential that there are those of us out there that are looking at the ones where it's hurting and marginalized people, leaving people behind, which is essentially what the Enterprise broke the rules for. There was one of their own that might be getting left behind, and they were willing to do whatever it took to make sure that they weren't left behind. The dogma of church theology, because it's being rooted in so many power structures and so many other pieces of people trying to secure who they are and define that they're better than other folks. I think we have to break them all the time. And it's very important that we're not timid about it. We don't have to be mean about it, but always realize that you're standing on the right side. If you're standing on the side of love and the side of inclusivity and not excluding people, then you're doing the right thing.
That's the right side. Yeah.
We're going to move on to the next one. Those Old Scientists, which is the Lower Deck crossover. Talk about for a minute about how one of the important parts that went on in this was the idea that all Orions who aren't pirates, that there are scientists, there are other folks. So talk about how Star Trek, I'm interested in your perspective on how Star Trek constantly takes on the issue of stereotyping and othering people and tries to present why those are things we shouldn't be doing.
So I think this is really interesting. And I think Star Trek has a mixed history on this. So it has always tried to show us that we have more in common than that which divides us.
Yes.
And, I think Gene Roddenberry made a particular effort to do that on the original series to show a diversity of humanity at a time when humanity was very divided. And so, for instance, having a Russian on the bridge of the Enterprise in the midst of the Cold War, having a black woman on the bridge of the Enterprise, right? That was very intentional.
Yeah.
However, Star Trek has also been super guilty of othering people. So the Klingons, I think, are a case in point, right? So the Klingons are portrayed as a violent race who also happen to be dark-skinned people, right?
Look at that,
and so played often, though not exclusively, is in the early days by white actors in kind of blackface. And so... Right, and so they're portraying them as these violent people who can't listen to reason, which is also a stereotype about black people. And so Star Trek is guilty of doing this. As time goes on, then it deconstructs, say, for instance, the Klingons and say, actually, it's more complicated than that, and blah, blah, blah. But I think Star Trek, when it's at its best, is showing us that through communication, through acts of diplomacy, we can always be trying to understand better. And so in this episode, Pike does that, right? With Boimler's help, he sees the Orions not exclusively as pirates, even though that's the reputation that they have.
Absolutely.
And he recognizes that maybe it's possible they could be scientists too. And whenever he validates them, then that we see you as scientists, you can have the credit for this discovery. They reply, that's all I've ever wanted, right? Is to be seen for who I am.
How big is that? I mean, in terms of a statement of all folks that get marginalized, to finally be recognized and no longer marginalized, to be understood as an equal human being, and that there's nothing about you that calls for you being separate and looked down upon, and that we all are good, we all are bad, no matter who we are. We got good parts of what we do, we got bad parts, and we all need to learn to be more loving and accepting of each other. And I keep getting distracted as I talk because my tongue is blue now. It's really distracting me.
That's why it's Mariner's favorite drink.
Those likes the pauses, right? She's like, this is cool. No. But yeah, I mean, it's one of the things I love the most about Star Trek is that if there is like a central theme, even though they fall prey to doing it themselves, as they're living in different decades where they're not quite as enlightened as the next decade is, and that's going to continue on down the road. And we're going to get back to that in the last episode, hopefully, before we run out of time for this segment. I love that they're at least consistently trying to talk about that we fail and we hurt ourselves and society when we other folks and buy into stereotypes rather than just being right there with them and valuing them for who they are and hearing their stories and appreciating it. So let's move on to Subspace Rhapsody. So ultimately, and this is what I somehow missed it. I kind of thought it in the first run through, but my second watching, it's the ultimately, this is not what I missed, but they tell us that it's emotions that get the crew singing. That's when they sing. And I started realizing how they actually brought this through all of the music. And La'an considers it a security threat that people are getting emotional and then singing about their emotions. So I thought maybe we should talk a little bit about the balance, because I feel like this is a lot what was going on in the show. The balance between emotion and logic in our lives, both at work and in our relationships, and how that first, how we balance that, but also how being emotionally real in our world and society today can actually feel like a personal security risk. And how do we go about trying to navigate that so that we can be as real as possible with each other?
Yeah, so I agree. I think that was at the heart of this episode. And I think the song where we saw that clearest was kind of an upbeat, kind of funny song, but it was between Kirk and number one, as she's talking about how to be a first officer. And she's talking about how she's kept this emotional distance from her crew and how what she's learned is, you need to relate to your crew, right? And you need to talk to your crew. You need to be a real person with them, and it's building trust. And so that resonated with me immediately because Kirk said, my brother always described you as the first type of officer that I thought that I should be. And I think that that's true, like for clergy in the church, right? Because they tell you in seminary to like stay distant from your congregation,
right.
you know, and then the longer you're in ministry, especially the longer you're in ministry at a single place, the more you learn like, no, these people know me and I know them. And like, we share things. You got to relate to each other.
I'm always going to care about these people. And it's absurd.
I'm always going to care.
It's absurd that you would teach me that I should keep an emotional distance from people where what we're talking about is how to be
vulnerable.
How to be community and care about other people.
Yeah. And that's exactly what they're talking about there for the ship to run efficiently, just like for the church to run efficiently. It is relationship building and mutual vulnerability that actually builds relationships. And I think that's right. And so I think that is a lot of what Star Trek is about generally, is that like what degree of logic versus emotional vulnerability. However,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say to the second part of your question about being vulnerable and the risks that it entails, that's also true, right? And especially if I think your obligation to be vulnerable varies depending on your status in society, right? And so I kind of feel like people like you and me have more of an obligation to allow ourselves to be vulnerable and to be corrected and to be informed than people who are already marginalized, because they have inherent risk just by being who they are whenever they allow themselves to talk in a public space about certain elements of their identity. Say you're trans, for instance, that like talking about that puts you in danger in a way that we're not in danger in the same way.
And I think that speaks to the importance of creating safe spaces where people can speak to it and not feel threatened and not feel like, and that's what a church should be over and over again. If your church is not a safe space, if the church where you're attending, and I don't care who you are right now, listen to me clearly. If your church is a place where you don't feel safe, one, talking about who you are very clearly, and two, asking a lot of questions that might confront what's being asked, don't stay there. It is an unhealthy place. You don't need to stay in that environment. Be in a place where you can be accepted. Okay, I'm going to stretch our segment just a little bit.
Good, yes, because we've still got another question at least.
It's actually two questions ultimately.
Of course.
But you can give a quick little hit here because you were talking about how this is the season finale, which, by the way, I should have been expecting a cliffhanger, but I wasn't. So when it said to be continued, I looked at my wife and I said, I thought this was the season finale, and then it hit me. Oh, this is the season finale. We got to wait another year. Like it took me a beat to catch it. But that's what they did the first season, so I should have expected it. Two quotes that I'd just like to get your reaction to, particularly since you talked about how they other Klingons. Now we have the Gorn.
Yeah.
Very different. And at one point, Pike is talking to a higher up, and he says, sometimes a monster is just a monster. What did you think about that? The Gorn don't look like anybody, anything. They are all aggressive. They don't communicate. All they know is dominate. There is no chance of discussion. What did you think about the fact that sometimes a monster is just a monster?
Yeah, so that stood out to me. Another one that was related to that, where monsters is a word to describe those who don't understand us. Which, no, I think that's an issue of othering. However, in this case, like the Gorn are also killing people, right? They're and that's what this episode is all about. Is about them, conquering and committing violence against people. So on the one hand, you can't make broad statements about people. However, you also can't not name injustice for the sake of like not offending or,
Yeah.
being, open-minded. William Sloane Coffin has this great quote: "Don't be so open-minded that your brains fall out."
They
Right.
fall out.
That, yeah, that like if there's oppression, we have an obligation to name that and to stand up for those people and to
Right.
not just be like, well, let's try and understand where the Gorn in this case are coming from. Well, no, like you got to protect people whose rights are being trampled upon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just war theory also plays into this. And all the steps of just war theory, if a person isn't willing to, if a group of folks aren't willing to dialogue, aren't willing to exchange, aren't willing to have a relationship, there's not much you can do other than defend the innocent. So,
right.
All right. Last quote from season
Yes.
finale that I want your response on. And I won't say, I'm just going to, here's the quote. I want your response.
Okay.
Sometimes hope is a choice.
Yeah. So that's complicated, right?
It is, right?
Because sometimes it's not. I mean, depending on what people are dealing with in their lives, sometimes you can't hope. I mean, especially like if you're in the state of severe depression or addiction or something like that. A lot of people desperately want to hope. They desperately want to have hope. They want something to cling on to.
Yep.
And no matter how much they want that, that doesn't mean that they can have it. And so I think if you're talking generally about, hey, the world
day-to-day stuff.
Yeah,
not life
right.
and
Like
death,
let's
not...
think about how we perceive things. Then that's probably true. But if we're talking, this American lie that we have that you can always hope in the midst of everything, that's just not true. And I think we've both probably known too many people, Mark, or experienced places like that in our own lives where it's just like you really want to hope, but you can't. You just can't. You got to wade through.
It's very simplistic. It's very simplistic, and in a lot of life, it's actually true. But when you are in the depths of being massively marginalized by the society that you sit in, when you are deep in depression, you can't put it reeks of pull yourselves up by the bootstrap. Just have a better no, that's not real. It's not just mean. It also defies what science tells us. I think there's just no reason for. I was a little disappointed in that line, I guess, is kind of what happened. I was like, in a simple vision, there are people who are kind of, Eeyores, where it's like, things aren't as bad as you think there are, and choose to hope about things that aren't. But there are things that no matter how hard you choose, it's too much. And we need systems and friend groups and communities that we're part of who can support us and be there with us in all of that. Okay, we've stretched this too far.
Okay.
But these were fun and important topics to talk about. Let's take a quick break and come back to our favorite segment, the Make Me Look Stupid segment.
Hey, welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We're entering our final segment, the Make Me Look Stupid segment, which Mark is going to do with a blue tongue, of course. Mark, though, before we get into this, I don't know if this is going to come up during the Make Me Look Stupid segment or not, but I feel like we can't get out of this episode without acknowledging the single best scene in Star Trek history, which is, of course, the Klingon K-pop scene.
Oh my God, that was incredible! Like, I think all hardcore Trek fans were expecting a Klingon opera, right?
Opera, yes.
Yeah,
that's what you always hear about.
That's how you like. because that's strong and it's
Yeah.
validating and like,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
instead they did K-pop. I was giggling like a little kid the whole time they were doing that.
I was too. I had a friend who sent me a message who had watched it before me. He's like, "Don't click on this until you've watched it, but this is the best scene." And throughout the episode, I'm like, "Well, what scene is he talking about?" And then when we got there, I'm like, "Oh, it's this scene. This has to be the scene."
100%.
So, kudos to them for that.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, so we've got to ask each other some questions. I don't know that this will make you look stupid, Mark. I don't think it will.
We're on the same wavelength. I'm not going to make you look stupid. I'm curious about your answer.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Because you easily could, Mark.
No, I don't know.
Look stupid. So here's just a question that I had that we didn't get to. It was Carol Kane, who's been an interesting character throughout all of this. She's always interesting, no matter what she said.
I hate that we lost Hammer, but I love that she's the replacement.
But we also got Scotty in this last episode.
That's my question. Stop.
Okay. Oh, I'm gonna keep talking because I haven't. Oh
no!
No. Okay. It's not about Scotty. Carol Kane's character starts quoting a guy that she's known from some time in her very long lifespan, and she says his quote is, "I always pretended to be someone I wanted to be until I finally became that someone, or he became me." So my question is, Mark, how accurate is that quote about how we ought to live our lives, or is it inaccurate? What do you think?
There's a lot of nuance in it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to answer it from a personal perspective.
Oh, okay.
The idea of fake it till you make it has actually been very important to me. There are so many barriers in the world where you think you know who you are, but there's so much that's being put up against you living into that. That can be difficult to navigate and can, as we are maturing, be hard for you to decide to go over and against what society's expectations are and the way that it affects you and the way it impacts you. I have found that having an understanding of who I believe I am and projecting it into the future and trying to live into that person has played a major role in me being able to be fully who I am and to bracket out some of those societal expectations and society's efforts to push you into a box and make you look like everyone else. So I kind of like the quote, and I think it's very helpful. There are ways you can position it where it's not helpful and can be hurtful. But for me personally, I think it's a great way to approach life if you can rationalize it within the context of society. How about you?
It really resonated with me because I think that's a lot of life. We go through these periods of transition, where our roles change and people perhaps see us in a certain way or have certain expectations. And I think a lot of ministry is like this, like you go through this schooling and you go through some kind of ordination, depending on what your tradition is, right? And then people expect all of a sudden for you to have magically changed personality and to be somebody different. And we're not, right? We're all human beings who are, who are who we are with all of our wonderful qualities and all of the things that aren't so great about us. And so I think sometimes living in trying to be the highest ideal for ourselves and, trying to embody that, sometimes we can accidentally become that person over time through
accidentally on purpose.
Accidentally on purpose. I mean, I kind of feel like that's what Jesus taught us about. I agree. Y'all are going to screw up, but try. These are the ideals. try to do it as often as you can. Talk about it and try and live into it, and you might accidentally create a better world while you're at it.
Push that ideal into the future and try to live into it.
Yeah.
I completely agree. Okay, here's my question for you.
Okay.
Again, it's just a real curiosity, much less. I'm not trying to make you look stupid. So we got Scotty in the final episode, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So now we've met, honestly, just about every original series crew member other than McCoy and Sulu. So two-part question. Will we meet McCoy and Sulu next season? Chekhov only showed up in the second season of the original series. So will we meet McCoy and Sulu next season? And if so, when do you think the era of Captain Kirk will begin in this series?
I think, okay, so I was thinking a lot about this because one of the pieces of kind of criticism that the season got is that Kirk was in it a lot. And they kind of had to manufacture ways for him to be.
Bring him in.
Yeah.
And they bent canon a couple of times too. Like there's a point. There's a point where Spock and at some point in one of the shows says, I only met him when he was at I don't remember. He was at this position. And so they put him temporarily in that position in this show so that when Spock met him, he actually was, even though it doesn't really match up completely with canon. They did that a few times.
Yeah, and there's this meme with Pike, Pike and Kirk, and Pike saying, "What the hell are you doing on my ship again?" Like he's on there a lot.
I've not seen that, but that sounds great.
That's a good one, right?
That's true.
I think that at the end of 5 years, we're going to see Pike go. I think he's going to have to make the choice to go through the future that he knows that he's going to have, and I think Kirk's going to be there ready to go. And I think it'll be interesting to see if they continue the series on then with Kirk, or if they decide to do something new or just drop it. But I think they are lining it up so that they can continue this on in a new direction with the understanding that Pike's not going to be there. Although I think Anson Mount is a large reason why this show works. I think they're all very talented actors, but amazing. It's his Captain Pike that he's so charismatic and funny and fun and self-deprecating about all of that it works super well. I think we're going to meet one of them over the course of the next season, probably towards the end. I don't know which one. But that's my prediction for how the show is going to play out. But by the end of it, we'll have all the original series cast ready to go, and they can continue on if they want to. Yeah. What do you think?
I sort of agree with you. I think it'll happen slightly faster than you do, and I think that it will continue slightly longer than you. I think next season with Nurse Chapel getting ready to leave, that Bones may be her replacement, and he may be the understudy of Mabinga, and we might have him there for a little bit. I think that's who we're going to see. So I think that might be the finale of next season. I think that by the season 4, that we will probably see Sulu, and that by the end of the season, it might be related to the cliffhanger at the end of season 4. That Pike is going to begin living into his known future that will be the end of his life, essentially. I think we're going to see that. I think that Strange New Worlds will actually, at least for a couple seasons, show us the original season cast in their early. It's like just before it happens, learning each other and figuring out. We'll see. But I kind of feel like the fact that we've met so many original series folks in 2 seasons, I feel like they're really pushing that. I think they're wanting us to want it, and that I think 3 seasons would be way too long to pay that off as much as they've done it at this point.
Yeah, I like that, and I hope that Strange New Worlds continues for quite a while. And I hope
Me
we
too.
keep Captain Pike around because I think he might be my favorite captain. I'm there
He's
for
amazing.
Captain Pike.
I,
Yeah, he is amazing.
Is he with
Contoured
Picard?
jawline, great hair.
That
right?
hair,
Just
man. That hair. My God, that hair.
It's fantastic. I'm
yeah.
idolizing him, just like Boimler, which we were
Right.
warned is not a good thing to do. You
No,
know,
not-
we ought to see people for who they are, and there's something theological about that. Hey, as much as I want to sit here for the next, I don't know, 2 hours and talk about this season, I guess we probably should close out today's episode and start looking towards next week. Mark, do you have any ideas about what we might watch next week?
I am certain of what we need to do next week.
Okay.
So this weekend, Blue Beetle comes out. It's not really one of the best known DC heroes.
Yeah.
But it's a really interesting hero. It comes from a Hispanic background. There's a scarab thing that he gets exposed to, and it kind of takes him over, and they have this symbiotic kind of host relationship. And particularly at first, he's not really into it and doesn't understand it. And so there's a lot of humor, but it's also like a coming of age story almost. And so I think this could be a really fun show to cover, in part because Gunn has been saying that this might be one of the first actual shows of the new DCU, because it kind of is it's its own little world, and we don't have any of the former stars showing up in it. So this should be fun, I think. And it's a great character, and it's a much needed character in a world where most superheroes are white.
Completely agree. I'm super excited. I love the Blue Beetle. I love
Yeah.
DC, and I love the actor who's playing him. He's been
yeah.
in Cobra Kai, and
Really good.
I've enjoyed watching that, and so I'm there for it. I've got high hopes. I'm going to try not to set my hopes like super
Too
duper high
right?
for
I
this.
hear you.
I want to go in, but I still think we're going to have a blast talking about it. Okay,
Absolutely.
so. We'll see you next week when we'll talk about the Blue Beetle on the Moonshine Jesus Show.